Hi, everyone. I have an exclusive discount for Hard Calls listeners to Pendemonium, Pendo's product festival. I would like to invite you to join me in Raleigh, North Carolina from March 24th to 26th with an exclusive 30% discount when you use the code HARDCALLS30. That's Hard Calls, all lowercase, and the numbers 30. Get your discounted ticket at pendo.io/Pendemonium. See you there.
I look at AI as another tool, another arrow in our quiver. I like to say that no one wants your product. They want some sort of outcome, and your product helps them achieve that outcome. I would say the same thing for most of AI, right? No one wants AI. They want something that AI can, and AI can maybe help them achieve that thing, that outcome, quicker, faster, easier than before.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Hard Calls, the podcast where we highlight the best product leaders from across the globe. If you're new to the show, I'd like to invite you to hit follow or subscribe. We want to make sure you stay up to date with all the latest episodes. Today, I'm joined by Jeff Lash, who is currently VP of Product Management at Insperity, where he's helping shape product strategy that delivers HR services to small and medium-sized businesses. Jeff has been in product for over 20 years, including advising product leaders at Forrester and Serious Decisions. Jeff has spent a lot of his career building great product teams where product didn't really exist yet, which makes him a great guest to chat today. Welcome to the show, Jeff.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, it's going to be a great discussion today. As you know, the name of the show is Hard Calls. And it's called Hard Calls because, that really is what our job's about every day. And so before we jump into all things product, I'd love for you to share with us today, what's one of the hardest calls you've had to make?
So I was thinking back, the first product management job I had was managing a product that was built for physicians. So I worked for a medical publishing company, so a company that provides medical books, journals, physician information. So if you go to the doctor and the doctor is looking up a drug interaction or a treatment option on the computer, it might be a product like that. This was years ago. I managed a small team, and the product we had was for physicians. There was a sister product we had that was made for nurses, and they were built on the same technology platform. So there were some features we were designing specifically for one audience or another, and there was another product team that handled the nursing product. But there were some features that were shared. And so I took over the product, I took over the team, and then probably a couple months into the role, learned about a new feature that was being developed for nurses, which was basically a dictionary feature. So nurses are reading something, they see a big medical word they don't understand, they can look it up. That was something that was highly requested among the nursing audience. The product manager on my team was planning on rolling that out to our physician audience. That wasn't something I had really heard about. We had done some customer research. We had a whole list of features that had been requested, as most product managers do. And that wasn't really something high up on the list. And so I remember asking around and asking the product manager and saying, why are we launching this? And the answer is, well, they're building it for the nursing product, so we can get it kind of for free. I said, yeah, but are people going to use it? Well, maybe some medical students might use it, or maybe this. And as I dug into it, it was like, this was not something we were launching because people really were asking for it. It was like, oh, well, what's the harm? And my answer was, well, there is some harm. It's one extra thing that takes up the interface. There is some development time. There's QA time. There's code complexity. Some people might say, why are you launching this dictionary feature when you're not launching these other features that we've been asking for? So I made the hard call to say, no, we're actually not going to launch it. And the product manager was a bit surprised, and a bunch of the other people were a bit surprised. My boss at the time actually was completely supportive and backed me up. And I think it very much set the tone for how I wanted to manage the product going forward differently than it had really not been managed in the past. And so I think that to me was, at the time, a very difficult call. Looking back, I'm like, oh, that was really easy. But it was, I was new to the role. I was new to the product. I'd inherited a team. And so I'm looking back, I'm really glad and proud I made the decision. But certainly at the time, there was a little anxiety in terms of, how are people going to take this internally, and how will they feel about it, especially if a bunch of work has already been put into doing it.
Yeah, I love that hard call. I think it's a really good one because the best product managers and product leaders, as you know, they drive outcomes and they drive value to our users and value to the companies we work for. And there's still a cohort of product managers and product leaders that celebrate because they put something on a roadmap and they shipped it. And this is like a perfect example of like, oh, I did it. I shipped it. I did it. There's something else coming out. Like, but if it isn't useful, it's just clutter and it's just frustrating to the end user. And so less is more sometimes. It's delivering the right features, designed in the right way, not just delivering more. So that's a great example.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. I've been in situations where never a team that I managed, but either when I was doing more like consulting, advising, or other teams in other parts of companies I worked in actually had annual objectives for number of features launched, not value added, not impact on retention or new sales or things like that. Literally, it was, I have to launch 4 new features this year. And so I joke sometimes it's we check the box, we wipe our hands, we have the pizza party, and then we move on to the next thing, which is luckily I've very much seen a shift in my 20 years of product management away from that, but it still does come up, and
it still does.
I think it's something a lot of product folks struggle with to this day.
Yeah. Well, I know one thing that you and I've talked about before, and I think is super interesting, I think our listeners will enjoy, is, when we're making these hard calls, the concept of like a reversible decision versus an irreversible decision, and just sort of impact of those and how you think about building software in sort of these 2 buckets. Tell us a little bit about that, Jeff.
Yeah, I mean, product managers are making decisions every day. Some of those decisions have major implications. Some of them are minor implications. Some of those decisions are easy to reverse and some are not. You actually, I think the phrase you used is one-way doors versus two-way doors, which I've never heard before, but I really like that. So, I worked in a lot of companies that were, a lot of products that were information services companies where there's IP that we are providing to clients through a platform. Once you decide to give clients access to a certain corpus of content, a certain type of content, if you decide you don't want to give that to them in the future, undoing that is very difficult. It can be done. I've done it. But, you say, oh, you get access to, in the case of that publishing company, all of our books and all of our journals, including these special ones. And then we decide, oh, these special ones we actually want to charge extra for. Undoing that decision is very difficult. So this idea of thinking, before I make a decision, I think about how hard would it be to undo this, either if I got the decision wrong or our strategy changes in the future. Generally, as a general rule, it's much easier to give people something later than it is to try to take something back. So that dictionary example, if we had decided, oh, the dictionary isn't a good feature, yeah, we could have removed it. And, honestly, in that case, not many people would have complained because I don't think the doctors would have used it a whole lot, but some people would have. They would have gotten used to it, and it probably would have snowballed and escalated other things. So I like to think about, how hard is this decision to undo? If we decide that we don't want to do it later, we want to change it. And also, what are the other options? I think one of the biggest changes in product over the past decade or so is experimentation, right? I think people always wanted to experiment, but we never really thought about it as much because technically it was just so difficult. So now if I say, hey, I might want to create, allow people to access this content they didn't have access to before, I can do it in a very controlled way. I can do it to a small audience. I can, have them opt in. I can, give warnings and things like that. There's all these sort of tools and technologies, obviously, as that make this possible. So I think that gives us more flexibility. So it's not a, stay up all night fretting over your decision. It's all right, let's maybe run some experiments or tests to give us some more data and confidence before we make a decision.
Yeah, I love that. I think, experimentation and this one-way, two-way door concept or reversible, irreversible decisions is such an interesting thing because one, to your point, if something is a very difficult, maybe it's not completely one-way door, but it's really hard and painful, to your point, to pull back, then you can do even more experimentation, right? To be more confident in your decision before you go with it. But on the other hand, sometimes it's a scarier place to do experimentation because even if you've only introduced it in a small group, you've introduced it, right? And so it's just a fun and interesting sort of debate to have with your team and yourself when you're approaching these more difficult, irreversible decisions.
Yeah, and I'll just add on to that. I think, obviously there's a lot of product folks that are doing a lot of experimentation. One thing that I don't hear discussed as much in those scenarios is the other stakeholder and audience implications. So a lot of it is, can development add that switch? Can we add that light switch to turn it on or off? And how quickly can we get that development done? But I've worked pretty much exclusively in B2B enterprise sales type environments, usually with a direct sales team. So when we decide to run an experiment, it's not just me and the development team and the designer deciding we're going to run an experiment. It's, all right, I need to figure out which clients are going to see this. And I need to talk to the account teams that are at those clients. I need to understand what the situation is at those clients. And is there a big renewal coming up that this might positively or negatively influence? I need to talk to our marketing team, because if they're marketing and saying, XYZ is not included, and now we're temporarily making XYZ included, that impacts our marketing. So this is really where...
And support, right? Like,
exactly, support.
How confusing for your support team when they get a support ticket and they didn't even know that these people have a different experience than everyone else.
Support, legal, finance. I mean, I've been in situations where, especially like with on more of the information services side, when you decide to make information available, that changes like your financial accounting in some cases of how we look at usage and if there are royalties we need to pay. So there's all these sort of implications. So it's not just, yes, there is definitely the technical, how do we make it happen? And from an experiment standpoint, how do we structure it? But it's all those other stakeholders. So I think that sometimes people get frustrated and it's like, oh, that means I need to slow down. To me, it's just, we need to be more careful. It doesn't mean you can't do it. It does mean I'm going to generalize and say there's probably a lot more steps you have to go through in B2B than B2C, where you can just like try out a new feature today and turn it off tomorrow. But I think it also is a lot more powerful if you can get it right and you can get sales on board, support on board, etc. You can get their buy-in and hopefully some help. And I've done some things like that where we did some experiments that gave us a lot of data and a lot of confidence, both with what we saw our users doing, but also with the other internal audiences, our internal ecosystem that we were partnering with, that gave them an understanding of how we were approaching something. So when they say, hey, why don't you just do X, Y, and Z? We can say, well, we're trying it this way and we're trying to get this data and here's how we need your help. And that way, when we did make some decisions, they were on board with it as well. And they knew something was coming.
I love that. So in this era of AI driven development and all the tools that are coming and we're using, it's wild. It's such a wild and fun time in product, and it's just changing the game. How have you seen that influence how you think about experimentation?
I like to describe this era of AI as kind of like the web in the late 90s. If anyone remembers or was alive or was involved in that, like, in 96, 97, 98, like the web was, burgeoning. Like clearly it was being used, but we had no idea of the full potential and the opportunity. And I feel like that's kind of where we are with AI. Like certainly it has been around for a while. It didn't just pop up a couple of years ago with OpenAI, but I think we can't even, I'm not a speaker, I cannot personally fathom all the opportunities and all the things that will change. So I look at AI as another tool, another arrow in our quiver. I like to say that no one wants your product. They want some sort of outcome, and your product helps them achieve that outcome. I would say the same thing for most of AI, right? No one wants AI. They want something that AI can, and AI can maybe help them achieve that thing, that outcome quicker, faster, easier than before. I'll use an example. One of my favorite AI tools I use, I'm a big pickleball player and coach.
Me too. I'm not a coach, but I just love it. I'm not a coach, but I love it.
But there's a great app that I use that you can record your matches and upload it, and it uses AI, and it basically tells you, it gives you a lot of guidance, whatever. So to me, AI is not the exciting part of it. The exciting part of it is, one of the things it does is it cuts out the dead time between points. If you've ever played pickleball or watched pickleball, like you play a point and then the point is over and then it's like 10 or 15 seconds before the next point. So if I need to watch a match, it might be 14 minutes end to end. But this tool automatically cuts out that dead spot. So I can watch one of my matches in 7 minutes or 8 minutes instead. So to me, the value is not the AI. The value is it takes me less time to watch one of my matches, or I want to just see all the shots that I missed. It can show me that. So AI is just a tool that helps me achieve that outcome. So I think right now there seems to be a lot of excitement about AI for AI's sake, or, the differences and the cool things, how AI works. But to me, it's really more about the outcome. I want to create a better presentation. I want to write a more coherent email. I want to, save me lots of time doing research. I want to, have my code refactored much cheaper than it would cost me to hire a human to do it, or much quicker, or, things like that. So I think the more we can think about outcomes, the more we can figure out how AI helps. I've seen also situations where people are using AI and it's like, you don't need to, or it's actually not the most efficient way of doing things. So I think there's lots of opportunities, lots of possibilities. We haven't begun to even explore all of them. But that's how I look at it, is like, at the end of the day, I'm trying to achieve something. My clients, my customers are trying to achieve something. And are there ways that AI can help? Just like there are ways that other things can help as well.
Yeah. I mean, it's really fascinating. I've been seeing really cool things with AI lately, to your point, where, you've got product managers or designers able to generate code, and we're able, in a matter of minutes, hours, to create new experiences and have them testable and usable for customers. So when you talk about this experimentation concept that you're talking about, and getting more confidence for these irreversible or complex hard calls, like the fact that we can now have an idea, use AI, have 2, 3, 4, 10 different experiences ready in a tenth of the time it would have taken us to do just one. And now be able, to your point, to put that behind a feature flag and pick a segment of our customer base and try it out, to have a level of confidence to make the hard call it's just fascinating. It's fascinating to watch what's happening out there. Product managers using, tools like Granola, or just the transcripts from their calls, and having agents searching for things like bugs or enhancement ideas, and automatically taking that bug and fixing the bug, and having code fixes in production before you're off the call. And it is just wild what's happening to our life cycle and our ability to go fast. But to your point, you can go really fast and just create really bad stuff. So if you don't know the job to be done, and you don't really understand the customer value and the problem you're trying to solve, who cares that you went fast with AI,
Well, and I think there's absolutely. And the other thing I think is there's also places where AI can get you certainly efficiency gains, but there's also places where like that's not the bottleneck. So I think another example I thought of, yes, like in the old days, and probably many people still, like if I want to test a concept with customers, right, I might need to mock up a wireframe or create a prototype. And in the old days, like I remember coding prototypes by hand in HTML, or doing them in PowerPoint because there wasn't any other tool. So now I can go to an AI tool, I can type a couple sentences, or upload a transcript of a meeting, and it'll create a prototype. Awesome. In the areas I've worked in B2B, the biggest bottleneck, the thing that takes the most amount of time in the prototyping and testing process is recruiting users. So yes, I can create a prototype in 1 hour rather than 3 days, but if it still takes me a week to recruit people and a week to conduct the interviews, that's saved a little bit of time, but it hasn't really nailed the biggest problem. So I think if you look at a lot of, and honestly, like maybe there's a tool out there that helps with that. I don't know. I haven't looked at it yet, but I think, we can apply AI in places that like save us some time, but is that really where we can best use it? And look, and the answer might be, hey, it's still an hour rather than 3 days, and that's good. But I think it's also, there's a saying, I'm not sure who to attribute this to, because I've heard it from multiple people. I'm not sure who the original author is. When Agile was all the rage, it was, Agile can help you develop bad products quicker. Right. And I feel like with AI now, anyone and their brother and sister can create a thing with a vibe coding tool. Doesn't mean that it's actually what people want. Doesn't mean it's actually designed the way people want. It has the right features. not to mention even all the technical security stuff back end. So yes, I mean, I there's a lot of talk about, how is product management going to change in the era of AI, and it certainly will. But at the end of the day, someone still needs to be responsible and accountable for what are our clients' needs. What is the customer problems we're trying to solve? What is the market opportunity, and what is the best way or a good way to solve it? Because I can create a product very quickly, but it might not address needs. It might not be a pervasive problem, might not be a problem that people will pay to have it solved. And it might not be the best way to solve the problem. So yeah, I can create something quick, but maybe if I spent more time actually answering those questions,
I mean, I think you're right.
Feed that into the AI tool.
I actually think AI really magnifies the need for great product sense and product taste in the role of product managers. And I do think it's amazing how fast we can go. And I think it's changing everything. But what it isn't changing is great product managers means you understand customer value, you understand what you're trying to deliver, and that is just more important than ever. So I couldn't agree with you more on that. Another thing that is hard for product managers is this always balance between short-term demands, right? There's this constant pressure. Customer requests, sales has the biggest deal ever, and they can't possibly close it if you don't magically deliver something, with long-term product strategy. How do you handle that? How do you coach teams to handle that, to decide what deserves attention and what's noise?
There's a lot of frameworks and approaches. You can say, all right, we're going to devote X% of our development resources to sales requests and X% to bug fixes and things like that, or we're going to allow people to, give sales a budget or give executives over, like things like that. And I think those are all good. I think those are good general frameworks. I don't think there's one right one. I think, but having some sort of structure like that is good. The thing that I've found that is more important is the fact that approach, how you answer those questions, really depends on where your product is at, where your company is at. So, look, if you're and I've never worked in an environment like this, but if you're in a startup that is running out of funding and you're worried about getting to the next paycheck, yeah, you might say, all right, we're going to do some things that are going to help land a big client, even if that's not exactly what we want to do long-term, but because we need to pay people next month, right? So I think that is completely reasonable. Now, obviously, if it pushes you way in the wrong direction, it might actually, sink the company, but within the realm of reason, I think that's appropriate. If you have a situation where, customers are generally very happy, but you're kind of like in the middle of the market and not really doing anything exceptional, and you've got a really visionary CEO or executive that is one of these people that sometimes comes up with these amazing blockbuster ideas, and they come to you with an idea, it's like, I might be more likely to try that, maybe experiment with it, not like put all my resources towards it. Yeah. I've been in situations where I've managed products where retention is really good, but new client growth is not. So we rotate and focus on that. I've been in situations where we had multiple different personas, and one persona is really happy and another is not. So we focus on that. So I think this idea of like, you always say no to a customer, you always say no to executive, like, I think those are sometimes too broad. I think the context of where your product's at, where it is in its life cycle, how it's performing, how the company is doing, are you in a startup? Are you an established company? Are you PE backed and looking for an exit, right? All these sort of things like are factors that there's no formula I can give you to do it, but I think thinking about those sort of things. And again, I think it's also aligning your stakeholders. So it's not just a product manager sitting in their office on their own making that decision. It might be, hey, like go to your marketing colleague and say, hey, I've noticed we've got this product, it's for administrators and teachers, and the administrators seem really happy, but the usage among teachers is not what we want. Like, so I think maybe next quarter we need to focus more on teachers, like just even that conversation, and then talking to sales and getting people on board with that. Again, it's not a scientific weighting process, but I think even just my experience with a lot of products is there's no one right answer. There might be a couple wrong answers, but there's no one perfect right answer. So it's more like, hey, we've got 5 things we could do, and all these 5 things probably need to be done. And, we're not going to have terribly different outcomes if we choose one or the other. So it's more about getting agreement and alignment and just moving forward.
I really, agree with you on alignment and getting input from, other parts of the business and other stakeholders. I also I'm going to be even one step more severe than you were in agreement, which is I hate when people make decisions based on formulas and spreadsheets and set percentages. To me, that just means you're not helping run the business. You're not in the business. You're not understanding. And so you're relying on a spreadsheet and you're relying on a formula to make a decision for you. I'm not saying I'm not data driven. I am always looking at data to make a decision. ARR impact, time to value. Is retention a problem? Is new growth a problem? I'm always looking at data, right? How much is this particular product or feature being used? Why is this the right strategy? How is this chasing our scorecards and North Star metrics?
Yeah.
But when you're making a decision because you had some weighted formula of three different people's opinion, or you set it and forget it and say this percentage of my R&D budget goes to X, Y, and Z. To me, it's just you're giving up actually participating and understanding the business because business pivot all the time and there's new data and information all the time. And so I am in violent agreement, but even one step further that those tools are not helpful and that you really have to do the work to make the decisions.
So the classic example of this is feature prioritization.
Yeah.
When I was at Serious Decisions, we built a feature prioritization tool and we, used it a lot with clients. But when I did that, and I did this a little bit in my time at Forrester as well, when I did that, I always was very careful to talk to them about how to use it. So for example, I don't remember how, imagine, and most people have built or used some sort of feature prioritization thing before, right? You have a bunch of different criteria, you weight them, you score each feature on it, and you come up with the numbers. Let's imagine your scale goes from 0 to 100. And you have one feature that's a 94.2 and another that's a 94.9. To me, I 100% agree with you that that doesn't mean the 94.9 is better because it scored 0.7 better. Depending on Steven's mood that day, he could have scored it a little higher or lower. But what I have found is that these things kind of clump together. So I could probably say the things that scored in the 90s are probably more valuable than things that scored in the 60s, right? So my coaching to people was always don't rely too much on the numbers, but they do tend to sort themselves out, right? The cream of the crop seems to rise to the top and the stuff that's not good seems to rise to the bottom. So don't obsess over the details of it. I'm going to maybe take a more moderate view. I think they can be helpful tools to help, but they are not going to give you the answer, right? They're not, to your point, it's not just rely on this directly. And oftentimes some of those nuances I talked about are not captured in any formula, right? It's, did we lose a big client last week? Or is this something that, our investors are asking for? Those sort of things are that's the gut part of it. And that's where you need to just make the hard calls.
Make the hard calls. And I just see too often that people who rely on spreadsheets are the people who haven't put the work in to build a real product sense and really understand the business and really understand the customer value and jobs to be done. And so, it's an easy fallback mechanism. And to your point, it's not that, any kind of prioritization numbers or frameworks can never be helpful to make decisions. It's just when people begin to rely on the framework instead of understanding the business, they get themselves in trouble.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. And the framework's only as good as the data behind it. If you don't know answers to the question, just making up answers and putting numbers in there is going to be worse.
Right. It's not going to be helpful.
Yeah.
Or not being opinionated as a product manager and just saying, I collected everybody else's opinion and weighted these things, and this is giving me the answer. I think great product managers are very opinionated.
I like to say product management, product development is not a democracy.
Agree. 100% with you. So I know, Jeff, you've had some really interesting experiences in bringing product-led processes, mindsets, behaviors, and product management principles to companies that are more traditional enterprises or non-software companies. The product itself wasn't software, but the way things were delivered was using software. Tell us some key lessons. I know a lot of our listeners are in the same boat. I say all the time, every company is a software company now. And so, what are some key lessons that you've learned specifically through driving mindset change from the inside?
Yeah, and just for context, so I've worked in a couple different industries, but there's some commonalities among both the products and portfolios I've managed, as well as when I was in an analyst advisor role. A lot of the clients I was working with were not technology companies. When I say technology companies, like in the classic sense, meaning like creating software or hardware that is sold into the IT department. So most of my work, most of the clients I work with, and I would imagine a lot of your listeners are financial services companies, healthcare companies, manufacturing companies, even consumer goods, where like technology or software is part of the value proposition. Either it is literally part of what the user is paying, the customer is paying for, or it is an enabling factor. We have online checking accounts, and really the checking account provides some value on its own, but the online portal and the mobile app and all that stuff. So I think the first thing is really kind of understanding, like you said, like understanding the business and thinking about it from a business perspective. Like, how does the company make money? What are people actually paying money for? What are they buying? And understanding how your products fit into that and how the technology fits into that. Most recently, the past, 10, 15 years, I've worked in companies where we are selling subscription services where part of the value is actually access to human experts. So literally the fact that I could talk to someone on the phone who is an expert, I can call them up, I can set up an appointment with them, and they can give me guidance, right? That is truly a human delivered service. So understanding, yes, we can do great things with technology, but that's part of the value proposition as well. So I think that number one is just understanding that bigger picture, how the company makes money, how we sell our services, and where the products and the technology fits into it. I think the second thing is probably trying to not talk in product language or technology language as much as possible.
Yeah. Use real words. Don't
use
try
real
to just
words.
confuse people.
I had a boss who was fond of saying, like, don't use a multi-syllable word when a single syllable word will do, and I'm probably as guilty of that as anyone. Like, really try to simplify, fewer words, simpler words, not because people are not intelligent, but just really to kind of step back and think about your audience, right? So if I'm working with a technology group inside a company, like, yeah, I'll be able to talk about technology stuff, but most of the people in the company are not technology people. They are, I worked with nurses and doctors. I work now with HR experts and payroll experts and things like that. So try to understand their language, talk their language, and simplify things in ways that works for them.
I love that. That is like, sometimes product people can, and engineers do this too, either use complex product language and terms to hide behind the fact that they don't really want to get into the meat of the discussion, or sometimes people can use it, unintentionally, like they're just, it's just the way they do things, and that's okay and understandable. And sometimes I think people use it to sort of hide behind things, and so I love that advice. I love it to your point, when you're in a traditional company and making sure you bring everyone along, because other people in the company have great ideas and have input. And when you kind of like product geek out, which I love to do, but you've lost them. But I think that's great advice, even in the most, modern technical SaaS companies too, because forcing ourselves to use real words and language versus just our fun product speak brings everyone along. So I love that advice.
I'll give you a real example. So I started with Insperity just about a year ago. And, one of the first things at the top of my list was to obviously understand our clients, understand the market. And so, when I would talk with salespeople, we would call our business performance advisors, or talked with our client liaisons, who are the people that manage that relationship. I didn't go to them and say, I would love to do some product discovery work, particularly contextual inquiry, and then maybe some card sorting. I would say, because if I did, they would have, their eyes would have rolled back.
No.
I'd say, I would say, like, hey, I would love to talk with some clients to understand why they chose us as a vendor, what they like about our product and what we can improve. And I would also like to see how they use our products and services in the course of their day. I'm saying the same thing. I'm just saying it in language. And to your point, I that's probably good language to use with anyone as well. So I think, just to your point, I don't think most people do that intentionally. I think it is just, we're so used to talking our language that we just assume that everyone else talks that language as well. And it can happen even with words that are simple. The classic example I use is the word roadmap, right? roadmap means something very specific to a product manager. I bet if you go to a salesperson and a marketer and a developer and, a customer and say the word roadmap, they're going to have very different pictures of something in your mind. So I'm not going to say a roadmap is good or bad, or you should or shouldn't. But like, rather than saying roadmap, like what really are we talking about? Is it a promise of what we are going to deliver? Is a vision of the future? Is it things like that? So even just simple words like that can often get misunderstood and misinterpreted. And I think it's, to your point, probably common everywhere, but certainly more so in companies that did not grow up as technology companies. Like, because I agree with your point. I think most companies are or have a major component of technology, but I think it's more like, did you grow up in that world, or did you, come over and realize that needs to be part of your culture over time?
Yeah, Jeff, I totally agree with you in terms of language and being inclusive for our other stakeholders. I think that's such a great approach. Any other key learnings that you want to share with our listeners in terms of, bringing a product mindset and product practices to a traditional company?
I think the only other part I'd say is just that whole stakeholder management and understanding the ecosystem partners. Again, I think I'm not going to say it's more important, but I think there's a really big part of that. So much of the stuff I read and the stuff people talk about is about, like, product management and developers and your engineering counterparts and your design counterparts, which again are very, very important. But my experience is that those relationships with finance, with legal, with customer support, with sales are just as important, if not more. Yeah. And I think, again, because in a non-software company, that's how the company, again, makes money. That's how they become. How they deliver, and maybe not just make money. That's how they deliver value to an organization, right? So understanding how those other factors, number one, it gets you an understanding of how the organization works. Number two, it gives you credibility, right? If you're just focused on my technology, that you're gonna be perceived different as understanding. Oh, well, here's how our support team operates. Here's how our call center operates. Here's what legal's prioritizing, for it now. That certainly gives you a level of credibility. And I think, and ultimately, all that information will help make your products better too, because you're not just designing something in a silo. You're understanding how the product you're in charge of or creating will work in this giant ecosystem where most companies are delivering value through many other mechanisms, not just through the one product. If you're a one product company and your entire revenue is based on, sales or subscription revenue of your one product, maybe a little different. But even then, still, you've got support, you've got marketing, you've got legal, you've got finance, you've got all these other people. So
I call that, Jeff, I often call that whole product, right? Yeah. It's like we think about shipping our product as just the technology, but it's not. It's the experience. It's everything around it. So I love that. Well, Jeff, it has been absolutely incredible to have you on Hard Calls today. Thank you for sharing your experience and your wisdom all the way from irreversible and reversible decisions to the impact of AI and to helping build a product mindset and making sure all your stakeholders are included. I know it's a lot of great information for our listeners. So thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you very much for having me. I enjoyed the conversation and I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you for listening to Hard Calls, the product podcast where we share best practices and all the things you need to succeed. If you enjoyed the show today, share it with your friends and come back for more.